Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Mandolen Mull. She was born in Fort Worth, Texas. Inspired by her family's history and politics, she obtained a bachelor's degree in political science and psychology and an MBA in international business at the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor. And then she, after what's the for those who aren't watching, is that a Baylor bear?
No, it's a Mary Hardin-Baylor Crusader. You got to throw up your seats for the Crusaders.
For the Crusaders. And Mary Hardin-Baylor is not affiliated with Baylor University, though, right? I made a mistake.
Mark, we are the original Baylor. We were the all-girls school of Baylor. We are very proud of that. We tend to not like that other school in Waco. So, we're pretty proud of being, the oldest school west of the Mississippi. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Mandolen, a little more about her career. After a decade of corporate leadership experience, she then earned her Ph.D. from the University of Texas at Tyler in organizational development and change. So I know we'll be talking about that later in the episode. She's worked with global clients in a wide range of industries, helping leaders and organizations with change implementation, leader development training. And then there will be a follow-up question about this, Mandolen, that she's a daughter of a master stonemason and an entrepreneur, which gives her a great appreciation for leadership in the building trades and manufacturing. Mandolen has written a leadership handbook and is currently publishing her multi-series memoir titled Mullings, Mullivation, and MullMentum. Oh, I stumbled over that, but welcome to the podcast.
Mark, thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to chatting with you, and I'm just thrilled to be able to have this discussion with you today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's great to have you here. Now, we had talked a couple of months back in prep for this. Is your memoir still in the currently publishing phase? I should have asked you if there was an update.
Right. So I published the first one, Grit for the Peril, that just came out in August. The other one, the next one is My Heart Sits With Yours. So it's a lot about my stonemason father, as well as just complexities of folks, and really looking forward to that one coming out. It's been a little bit harder for me to write the preface for, because I'm dedicating it to some iron workers that I have really bonded with. So and then we just keep rolling. We've got at least 3 more in the series.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I will make sure there are accurate links in the show notes and to Mandolen's company page and that name MullMentum. I said it better that second time. So, Mandolen, I'm really curious to hear. As always, here we're going to start with the core question: what's your favorite mistake?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So my favorite mistake is when I graduated with my MBA from the McLane College of Business at Mary Hardin-Baylor, the original Baylor. I got an opportunity to go work at McLane Company, which is a large grocery distribution company, right, all across North America. And so I walk into this 116-degree warehouse. It was the flagship location of McLane. And I had been identified as a hypo, so a high potential. They wanted me to get a year's worth of operations in the warehouse and then move up within the organization. Yeah. So I walk into this warehouse, 116 degrees. I'm the first female to oversee the loading dock, which was 160 men. And I walk in with my dress and my high heels and my pearls. And my nickname, I heard, was Degree, right? Because here I had this MBA. And so it was like, oh, we've got this new little supervisor. Because I'm all of 4'11", and about $110 is my fighting weight. So I walk in and I knew like these guys were not going to buy into me. So it took me about a week of me just shutting my mouth and listening. And the last day, my colleague introduces me to all of our team. So we had first shift and second shift. And he says, this is Miss Mandolen. She's going to be your new supervisor. The next several weeks, we're going to introduce her to how we load these big giant trucks. But today, we're going to show her how we do Push-Up Friday. And without thinking Mark, I had a moment of insanity, and I said, oh, this is where I show you up in front of all my guys. You could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah.
Like, everybody in that warehouse was like, what did she just say? This tiny little thing. So my colleague, we all get down on this dusty warehouse floor, right? And I start doing push-ups. Only I did not recognize that my colleague used to be a drill sergeant. So he starts doing the down, up, down, one. And I'm like, that's 3 push-ups, bro. You do not know how to count. I did all of 3 push-ups to his 1,000.
Yeah.
And I just stayed in the plank position thinking, do not let your knees touch this ground. Your daddy will find you and shame you in front of her. Like, my father would have killed me if he found out that I had just, given up. So I'm shaking and all those things, right? Watching all these other men fall over after they'd done 20, 50. And so we get up and my colleague is like, let's give Miss Mandolen a round of applause. And I said, no, let's not. I said, but here's the thing. Clearly I have some work to do. I'm going to come in early every Friday and do push-ups with you. It's going to take me a while to get as good as you guys, but I'll keep working at it, and we'll make progress. And so as we walked away, my colleague said, Mandolen, there's not a person in this warehouse now who will not walk through a fire for you. Nobody expected you to do that. Yeah. And Mark, I wish I could tell you that was planned. I wish I could tell you I had intended to do that. It totally was just my personality.
Yeah.
But it earned me credibility where I never would have thought it could have done that or that I expected to have it. And what was so great was that Ove would see me in the break room. I'd be like, 22, what's up? I was really proud of myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was something that I never expected to happen. But gave me a massive lesson in how being authentic can really help you earn credibility. But looking back on it, that could have really backfired on me.
So Mandolen, it's a great story. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that the mistake was that sort of impulsive boasting of here's where I'm going to show you up, but at least you managed to recover from the mistake. Is that right?
That's absolutely right, Mark. So I just kind of ran my mouth and couldn't back it up. So that was a massive mistake, right? I mean, how embarrassing. And what kept me going genuinely, truly was my ego of, please don't, if somehow this word gets back to your father, that you walked into this warehouse, talked a big game, couldn't back it up, your daddy is going to whoop you. I just knew, somehow, right? So that's what pushed me forward. But then it wasn't until my colleague, it was just, again, my authenticity to come out and say, hey, I'm really embarrassed that just happened. Let me make it right going forward. That was really where my authenticity came forward. And then for my colleague to bring that clarity to me that I didn't have of, wow, you just earned some credibility, which was a massive, massive lesson for me.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said for acknowledging a mistake and saying, here's how I'm going to make it right. Here's we're going to move forward differently. It seems like there's a good leadership lesson there.
A massive leadership lesson, right? Because look, ego gets in insecurity, gets in our way every day.
Mhm.
It goes in
Yeah.
multiple times a day, right? It's so easy to get hijacked by our insecurities, by our embarrassment, and by those mistakes of just trying to cover them up. And, fortunately, in my situation, I could not cover up that mistake. I mean, it was very apparent.
Yeah.
So I had no other choice but to lean into it. So now when you think about that, of like, okay, if I make a mistake, I should lean into it and pretend, regardless of if I'm the only person who has knowledge that that occurred, or if it was open for everyone to see, I've got to treat it the same way, in a very transparent and open way, and lean into that so that I can make progress going forward, rather than trying to hide it, pretend it didn't happen. All of that ends up just making the situation so much worse.
Yeah, for sure. Now, going into that situation, being I cannot relate personally to being the only woman in an environment full of men. I can relate to my first job out of college at General Motors, where anyone with the college degrees would get called, in the union newsletters of college boy, college girl. Like they would throw this around like an insult. But I think most of the problem would come from when people did more talking than listening. So I appreciated the part of your story. I love it when a company sends somebody with a college degree into a frontline operations role to understand the real core of the company. Was it your natural style to, as you put it, shut your mouth and do a lot of listening, or did someone give you good advice that was a great way to get started?
A good question there, Mark. So really what it came about, so I've always been kind of the youngest on the teams that I've led. And so I learned really quickly in my career, because the reality is, in all of my career, I've only had about 3 months of my career where I did not oversee other employees.
Yeah.
Out of the entirety of my career, right? Since my undergrad degree. So very early on, I was responsible for looking out for other people. And because I had that stonemason entrepreneurial father, I took that responsibility extremely seriously. And I knew that if I could not reach the people I led, I could not teach them. I could not support them. I could not advocate for them. So I had to build that bond. And in order to build a bond, I had to show that I wasn't a threat to them.
Yeah.
That I wasn't, that I genuinely was on their side. And so that meant I had to observe. I had to listen. I had to pay attention to what their pain points were. Right. And then figure out ways for me to meet those pain points, not go in with assumptions that I knew what the problems were, what was disrupting them or creating issues. I had to genuinely really try to meet them where they were at and then help them grow forward. And so, that was something that from early on, I think I've grown much more with it in my career. But I did have a big portion of that, and largely from inspiration from my father.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember how much you talked to him about this position and the opportunity, the challenges, how other than your fear of, it sounds like if you messed it up, he wouldn't be happy with you, but I'm sure he gave you some advice to help you not mess it up, right?
Yeah, so my father dropped out of high school to go to work. And so, me going and getting a private college education and then going on and getting advanced degrees. And I ended up eventually dedicating my dissertation and that degree to my father so that he did have a degree. Yeah. So we had a lot of conversations about that my education was extremely important, but that it could be seen as a detriment in, just as my gender or my age or my inexperience could be seen as a detriment.
Yeah.
And my father was like 5'7". He was scrappy. He definitely had Napoleon syndrome. And, so he was all about me being an underdog and surprising people with that aspect of giving them what they didn't expect. And so his thoughts on it was, people have a mindset of who you are before you walk into the room, or right as soon as they see you. So where is it that you can reframe their perspectives in a positive way? Where can you help people see your heart and that you genuinely want to help? How can you, show that? Removing any kind of trappings of a title, of, all of these kinds of expectations. Where can you just connect with another human being and recognize your responsibility to lead them, and then help them understand that they've asked you to make them sustainably successful. They may have forgotten that they have, but that's what they're asking of you, and that you're not going to let them fail on your watch. That you take that responsibility so seriously. And so, that was those were very transparent conversations that we had pretty consistently. That really, really formed my leadership style.
Yeah. Well, and then I'm sure they realized quickly, if they thought, well, here's another one of these young college people, they're just punching their ticket and slumming it with us for a year before they go off into their big old fancy office job. I'm sure they realized, that was not you. And like when I was working in a factory right out of college as an engineer, not as a supervisor, I tried to build relationships the same way, of like prioritizing safety concerns that weren't being addressed, of just like on a human level, I care for you. I do not want you to get hurt. We're going to get these things fixed. And that was, that was in the job description. So cool. No.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. No, that's okay. I got excited. I'm sorry. What was cool?
We got a little internet delay happening. Sorry.
What was so very cool, Mark, is that I ended up actually only spending a year at McLane. And the reason being was because the employees that I mentored to backfill my position in the succession plan came to me and they said, Miss Mandolen, we think you should be a college professor. We think that you should be supporting people on their journey and helping their career development, just like you've helped us. Because I helped them go back to school because there was a requirement that they had to have a degree in order to be a supervisor. And so they brought me the job description that totally changed my life, of me going to Tarleton State University, being a professor to adult learners, which has always been a passion of mine. Again, a lot of my students have worked in manufacturing realms or building trades. I've been training union ironworkers for the last 8 years. Again, a kind of similar approach of folks not expecting me to really be able to resonate with folks on a job site or something like that, and being blessed to be accepted into that realm. But yeah, so much of that came about from just genuinely connecting with folks, Mark. It cannot be overstated.
Now, are you coaching iron workers who are going to become supervisors or leaders of other people in their trade or in their job sites?
Yeah, so I develop iron workers who are instructors in the classroom, who are supervisors on the job site, who are running their own training facilities, managers, agents, district presidents. So it's really the most fun work that I get to do. I love working with these folks. They're so much fun. They have accepted me. They teach me, they push me, they do not let me get away with anything, which is great. It's incredible to get to see the generational mentorship that transcends in that realm, Mark, because I will have these ironworker leaders stand up and say, I'm a 4th generation iron worker. I've yet to hear an office manager tell me that they're a 4th generation office manager. There's such a cool embedded sense of pride and culture, right? You know what I mean? And so you see that and you want to champion that. You want to step up with them and develop them forward because you see that there's something super special and cool about this. And so, getting to help them develop the future of their trade and as they build things that last, just like my father would always say, wood rots, steel rusts, but masonry lives forever. So I get a little bit of flack from the ironworkers on that, but it's hard to change the stonemason's daughter perspective on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's sort of like maybe friendly rivalry amongst branches of U.S. military service. Yeah,
spot on. And there's always the like one that nobody likes, right? like one branch or one trade, building trade that like everybody just dogpiles on. So I'll leave them nameless here, but yeah, it's just cool to see, because again, when we think about military branches or even first responders, we see that generational through line, right? Like people having an embedded identity of their work because their family members have also chosen that profession. So they never get away with it or get away from it. So like at Thanksgiving, work is being talked about, not just in like, hey, Mark, how's it going with work? Like they're very formative discussions. And so when you think about the health of these individuals in that type of work environment, and how we're developing those types of leaders because they never escape the work life is such a part of their identity. There's a lot for us to do to embed really important, formative succession planning, sustainable type leadership in those environments. And those have traditionally not been really invested in a lot of the leadership development realm. It's been like all the continuing education and things like that, but those tend to be more technical and tactical as opposed to some of the like legacy building, truly in addressing ego and insecurity, like I had, head on. Those are fields where we've really got to do it. So it's really cool work.
Yeah. I want to ask another question, Mandolen. And, sometimes I ask questions on behalf of the audience, the listener or the viewer. In the bio, it says, you were born in Fort Worth, and they may be looking and say, well, you've got very red hair. It sounds almost like, how often do people make the mistake? It almost sounds like you're from Ireland, but I know this is part of your personal story. It's okay to ask, I hope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So while I was getting my Ph.D. in change, I suffered brain damage and something called acquired torsion dystonia. I was unable to walk correctly, talk correctly. It causes like muscle contractions. And at that time, so this was 8 years ago this month, I was told that within 5 years, I would be severely deformed and unable to walk, talk, or feed myself.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember telling the doctor, I said, well, I'm getting a PhD. Like, that's not quite in my plans.
Right.
Like, I didn't really want that. And so we didn't know what we could do to really help facilitate, but we tried everything. And fortunately, some of it was like singing therapy. There was all kinds of different stuff that I had to go through. And today I'm still on quite a bit of medication. I'm still get Botox injections. I have to do a lot of stress mitigation because my dystonia gets worse with stress. But overall, I'm able to walk, talk, feed myself just fine. And clearly do things. I just have this really strange accent that changes from time to time. And so, yeah, I feel like Ross off of Friends, where he like had this episode where he adopts a British accent or whatever and doesn't know how to walk it back. But it's so hard, Mark, because like people will ask and they're like, strangers, and how do you tell a stranger like, I have brain damage, but don't worry, I'm fine? You want to be cool about it, but at the same time, it's such a strange thing. But I beat the odds. And I figure in the line of work that I do, in the very beginning, it was difficult because I stuttered it quite a bit. I had a lot of difficulty getting words out as quickly as I like. I'm a fast talker. I get energetic. So it was extremely frustrating. And unfortunately, I'm able to talk as fast as I want. I just have this strange accent today.
I would call it it's a delightful accent. I mean, it's got, a bit of an Irish lilt to it. It's not weird or strange. Unusual compared to what people from Fort Worth normally sound like, but is and I know you probably don't want to define yourself by that condition or that disease. Is that something that is rare, but is it sort of latent and then it kind of develops in someone's early adulthood, or what happens?
Yeah, great question. So I have severe Crohn's disease as well. And so we didn't know like how much the Crohn's may have affected it or something else like that, or if it was the Crohn's medications. To this day, we still don't entirely know. But 1% of the population gets dystonia. 1% of that 1% gets acquired torsion dystonia. And it usually is something that an individual will have in their childhood. My parents went back and kind of looked at things where when I was younger, there was some, I ran crookedly or something like that. I had a speech impediment. But nothing as severe as what happened in 2016. That was, to the point where, everybody thought I was having a stroke, and was walking, eventually had to start walking with a cane. The spasms were just full body spasms. They were pretty substantive. And so today I still have some setbacks with it, especially in periods of high stress. But for the most part, it's important to me to share with people, because I did have a former student of mine, Mark, who got diagnosed with dystonia. And she told me later, Dr. Mull, when the doctor told me what my diagnosis was, I wasn't afraid anymore, because I knew you had it. I knew I had a friend to help me through it. And I knew what you had accomplished.
Yeah.
And so as awkward as it is for me to talk about these things sometimes, at the same time, I have to believe it's for a reason, and that, I'm able to help other people through my work. And that matters to me, because we're all here on this earth to help each other. And if somehow through my story, because I didn't know anyone who had Crohn's when I got diagnosed, I didn't know anyone who had dystonia when I got diagnosed. I never heard of these things.
I don't think I've heard of it before
isolating.
Either.
Yeah, it was super, super isolating. And that's tough. So to be able to share my story, in the hopes that it offers support for someone else. I don't presume that their experience, to know what their experience is like. I recognize each person's is unique, but at least they would know that they're not sitting in that alone, is my hope. Yeah. Because those exam rooms get scary, and when you start talking about brain damage and all, like things get scary. And so hopefully I can offer comfort to other folks is my goal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Mandolen, and for talking about that. And let's shift and talk about, of ongoing accomplishments. Writing a book is a big one, of course. So the first book, Grit for the Pearl, I'd love to hear about the book. It brings up imagery of creating something positive out of challenge. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. So I do write about my health issues, and I write about I had a late-term miscarriage, and then I had some traumatic surgeries that sterilized me, and all of these types of things that I overcame, and continued to be successful in my career. And the Grit for the Pearl came about for two reasons. One, my grandmother, my Nana, used to always say there was nothing that a good pair of pearls, heels, and good perfume couldn't fix. And I think that's sage advice. The other thing was, gosh, Mark, we live in this like grind mentality, right? With all due respect to folks like David Goggins and all these other like brilliant people who I have a ton of like, respect for. I think there's enough hard and jagged and harsh and crunchy things out there in this world that I don't want like hard times to make me a diamond. Like I don't want that pressure. I would much rather say, give me a little bit of grit, give me a little bit of something that I can work with, I can transform into a self-illuminating thing. That's what I want more of, is to be able to say, all right, that's some adversity. It's not entirely fun. It can be irritating and abrasive, and yet I can work with it enough to transform it into something remarkable. And so that was really my purpose in writing the book, was again hoping that, I was told that no one needed or wanted to hear my story. And that really hurt my heart, because I just thought that's almost saying like things that have happened in my life were punishment. Now, I was raised Southern Baptist, so that guilt is pretty like everything bad that happens to you. It's almost like Catholic guilt. Everything bad that happens to you is because you did something wrong. And I had to believe that these were stepping stones, that these were positive disruptors in my life. Right? I mean, I beat the odds, Mark. Like I beat the odds. So why would I keep that quiet? Why would I hide back and deny that former student of mine comfort in a terrifying moment? And so as difficult as it can be for me to share my story, and as worried as I get sometimes that people might think I'm playing a victim or something like that, it makes it a little awkward for me sometimes. I really had to believe that these are things that could potentially help other people. And so, I hope that folks, the feedback I've gotten so far is people saw my intent in my heart as I wrote it. And all of the multi-series book is from LinkedIn posts that I've been making over the last year. And I found out that I was kind of writing on 5 themes. I never expected to write a book, let alone 5 books. But people showed up while I was drinking coffee every morning and just writing out my Mullings. And they encouraged me to write these books. Something resonated with them. And I found a phenomenal community there in LinkedIn. And it's just something authentic and meaningful that's just been very, very cool. And hopefully, the books all give inspiration and support to people, help people feel seen. And that's my hope. Yeah.
Well, and you're leaning into your last name. Again, our guest, Mandolen Mull, her Mullings. You talk about coffee. We get into the holiday season. People expect you to bring mulled wine, perhaps.
I haven't gotten to writing my Mullings over mulled wine. I should do that. I should also talk. I messed up on something recently with a group of students that I was teaching, and my announcement to them was mulligan, but I had it mull with a hyphen again. But what's funny is a farmer student came up with MullMentum. Saying that they had never left my class feeling without feeling inspired. And so that they had come back from MullMentum. And then one of my ironworkers came up with Mullivation. So, when people come up with catchy things, you got to kind of lean into it, right?
Of course. Yeah. No, That's a good one. And instead of my favorite mistake, we might title this episode "My Favorite Mull Again."
Right. See, that would work perfectly.
Yeah. I'm going to jot that down. I may need to
there we go.
to tap
I love
into
it.
that. So, maybe final question, Mandolen, I want to ask. You mentioned those other 4 books. What are those 4 themes? What can people look forward to in those future books?
Right. So this next one that's coming out is called "My Heart Sits with Yours."
Mm-hmm.
And I write a lot about the complexities of my father. You've heard me talk very highly of my father and what he taught me. But my father was a very angry individual. He had some maladaptive skills of drinking and adultery. And we had some crunchy periods of our lives together.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to really robustly love and accept my father unconditionally. And so then that transformed into my leadership with other people and how I developed them through complexities and the messiness of life, right? Like really trying to accept that I'm messy, you're messy, let's navigate messy waters together.
Sure.
And so as I wrote that book, the title "My Heart Sits with Yours" came about because, you know, there's so many times we want to offer comfort to someone and we don't have the right words. So we offer some like awkward but well-meaning kind of platitude. The best I can say to folks is my heart sits with yours. Like I know words aren't going to offer comfort, but know that I'm trying to be there with you in this moment. So that book is the most emotional one out of all of the series. The one after that is "Batten Down the Lashes," written about the family that my work has created. I've been incredibly blessed to create these wonderful the mentors I've had, the mentees in my life, and one of those mentees who brought the foster daughter I've been raising the last year into my life, whom I named Harbor. So the next book after that is Haven and Harbor. So my house is, I call the Haven Woods, and my daughter Harbor for safety. Right. So I'm writing about our story of me becoming an unexpected overnight foster mom a year ago tomorrow. And then the last one is another leadership book of some of my leadership insights and things that I've kind of observed along the way. So yeah, we've got some interesting ones coming up, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, people can sign up or they can follow you on LinkedIn. They can sign up through your website, I'm sure, to be notified of those future books. So again, our guest today, Mandolen Mull. Thank you for sharing your Mullings, your mulligans. Thank you for sharing what you've learned and what you've overcome through all of that. And I do want to give a shout out to a previous guest and mutual friend of ours, Kyle Kumpf, who was kind enough to recommend you as a guest for the podcast, Mandolen. So Kyle, thank you for doing that. Mandolen, it's been a pleasure to meet you through this process. And thank you for being a great guest today.
Thank you so much, Mark. And Kyle is an absolute mensch, just a phenomenal human being with great insights. Just a great human. So thank you so much, Mark. And thank you, Kyle.